Hello. Well, Pastor Leo Cunningham coming to you from the main sanctuary of Glenwood United Methodist Church, located on the west side of Columbus, Ohio. And welcome to another episode of Another Sermon for Another Time. Now, for those who don't know where that title came from, it's an expression that I've used for years when I'm talking about something in a sermon, in a message, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. And it's better just to, I'll tell you that story another time. We can talk about that a little later on. And eventually it evolved into another story for another time. So today's episode, I made a reference on Sunday to something, and I watched the playback. I didn't say another sermon for another time. The expression I used was, we can talk about that later. Well, now it would be later. And so I thought I'd share this with you. It's a backstory. And some of the questions that happen. And a lot of pastors aren't going to give you backstories. They aren't going to, let you behind the scenes on how some things operate. A lot of times people ask, well, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. And sometimes they mean that rhetorically. They're frustrated. Well, I don't understand why this happens this way. And they don't get an answer. Well, usually around me, I try to provide an answer if it's the atmosphere or it's the time, or maybe we talk later. So you have an understanding. Doesn't mean you agree with it, just so you have the backstory. So I'm going to share with you the backstory. I've been serving in churches since 1999. My first student appointment was October of 1999. The majority of my time, as of now, has been rural ministry, even though I'm from the city originally. Never served a suburban congregation. I'm serving an urban congregation right now. Urban by definition of geography. And I've served what are called single point charges, which is we're just one church. I've served multiple point charges, where it's one pastor in charge of multiple churches. I've done 3-point charges. I've done 2-point charges. I've got colleagues who are doing 5-point charges. West Virginia, Pennsylvania kind of area. It's wild. So I'm going to tell you a little backstory about kind of how I operate based off of experiences. And to say we don't take our experiences with us and they don't shape us, inform us, would be disingenuous, because they do. We try not to always have our experiences maybe necessarily have a large of an impact on us that they do sometimes, but a lot of times, things happen and people have a way of remembering things. And they'll see situations that remind them of other situations, and they will respond consciously or unconsciously. So having a meeting with regards to a 2-point charge. And the names are changed or omitted to protect the innocent. Dragnet, I believe, was the intro to that, the movie and the television show. Lots of pop culture references. And Dragnet was well before my time on television. So we're having a meeting about these 2-point charge, these 2-point charge, these 2 churches. And they weren't able to have their leadership teams meet at the same time and have one conversation. They're scheduling issues. So we ended up having 2 conversations. We met with the district superintendent. Those who don't know, district superintendent is the person who's in charge of an area with a group of churches. And the district superintendent answers to the bishop. The bishop is in charge of a larger region. Here in West Ohio, our bishop currently is Gregory Vaughn Palmer. He is in charge of oversight of almost 1,000 churches in what we call the West Ohio Annual Conference. Just some background. And the conference is broken into districts. Currently, right now, where I'm at in Glenwood, it's the Capital Area South District. Our district superintendent is Dr. Bias. This is not a Dr. Bias story. So if you're going to try to figure out who I'm talking about, you can take him off the list. And I've served in a couple of different districts. So just don't worry about that part. So we're supposed to have this meeting about me coming to serve as pastor. And some pastors bring their spouses to these meetings. At the time, I was still married, so my spouse was with me. So, like I said, churches can't meet at the same time. So we meet with one church, and we talk. Who are they, their history, their past, where they think God's, calling them to, versus where they're willing to go. Even inside another sermon for another time, there's another sermon for another time about pastor profiles and church profiles. And towards the end of the conversation, they asked the district superintendent about, setting worship times. And the district superintendent said, well, we'll get together and we'll have that conversation, we'll have that meeting about the worship times. A few days go by, meet with the other church. Same thing, who are they, their history, where they've been, want to hear about who I am. And towards the end, someone from this other place brings up, hey, what are we going to do about worship times? And the district superintendent says, well, you don't have to worry about changing your worship time. We'll have the other place change their worship time. Now, I glance over at my then wife, and I was like, wait a minute. We go, we leave, we're driving back, and I was like, that didn't sound right. That's not what we told the other place was going to happen. So now there's already this tension showing up with this. So the time rolls around, a few weeks go by, things happen, there are announcements and who's going where and what's happening with what. And there's a meeting that occurs. And there is some confusion because the churches weren't sure about, we didn't know we were supposed to attend this meeting. And so there are emails flying, there are phone calls happening. We're like, yeah, this is a meeting, and after this meeting was over, we're going to talk about worship times. And so people show up to the meetings late and whatnot, blah, blah, blah. And meetings, so the one larger meeting is over. We go to another part of the area. The worship room was one of those worship rooms with like movable chairs and tables. So we go to another kind of back corner so we can have this secondary meeting. And, I'm there. The assistant to the district superintendent is there as well. And eventually, a small group of people from place number 2 show up first. They show up, and first thing out of this one parishioner's mouth is, to me, there's a rectangle table. It's long. I'm sitting on one end. The assistant to the district superintendent is sitting on the other end. This individual is to my right. And first thing out of her mouth when she sits down is this. She looks at me and says, "You lied." I said, "Excuse me? You lied to us. You told us that we weren't going to have to change our worship times. So I don't understand why we're here. You lied." That's the first thing out of her mouth. Now, I haven't preached yet. I haven't moved yet. Haven't done. That's how the meeting started. Because of grace and mercy, I said, actually, I'm not the one who said that. The district superintendent is the one who said that. And the other people who were in the meeting a few weeks earlier look at her and say, yeah, he didn't say that, it was the district superintendent. Her response was, oh, well, I just know somebody's lied. This is why I don't give information to individual people. Everybody, to the best of my ability, is going to get information at the exact same time. So the people who have called during COVID saying, well, you know what, tell me what you're thinking, Pastor, and then I can share it with other people. Nope. No, not happening. If you're having a one-on-one conversation with me about, there's some things I'll give you details on, but if there's something that's going to be larger, I am not playing the telephone game. I am not doing grapevine. It's not productive. It's not healthy. And people will sometimes put their own spin and interpretations on things that are said. That's another sermon for another time for today. So if you want to know why I don't give people specific information, I try to avoid giving specific information sometimes in small group settings, is also because one of the things we studied in school was group dynamics. And your group dynamics change based off of the size of the people you're dealing with. It doesn't matter if it's rural, urban, or suburban. If you are functioning under 100 people in worship, there are these dynamics. If it's under 300 in worship, it's another set of dynamics. If it's under 500, it's a different set of dynamics. If it's over 100, it's another set of dynamics. So I know this. I am well aware of the fact of how this works, how just group numbers function. I know that people are going to make phone calls, and they're going to get their own versions of stories. And they're going to make decisions based off of their narratives without necessarily getting the other side of the story. And why? Because I've experienced it. I've watched it happen at this appointment, where people were talking about things and then made a decision about what I was thinking or what I actually said that I never said, I never did, but made decisions based off of pieces of information. And now the human brain is designed to fill in narrative gaps. It's how we're structured, it's how we're wired. We saw a really great experiment about that one time with regards to phone conversations. If there are large gaps, and people will naturally start to try to listen to other parts of the conversation, and in their minds, they might try to fill in the gap of what the person must have said based off of their response. So I know that's part of human nature. Because I know that, I can respond in a different way. Because I know that a lot of places are going to have secondary meetings. You might have a meeting in the church, but then there's a meeting in the parking lot, or in this case, meeting many places via email. They'll have secondary meetings. I have been to churches where that's been the issue, where there have been secondary meetings. And some of those secondary meetings were actually in violation of the Book of Discipline with regards to how rules are structured. But yeah, that's my backstory. It was a very tense relationship with me and this parishioner for the time I was at that church. Now, I'm not quite sure what it was on her end towards me, but for me, it was very troubling that the first thing you're going to say to your incoming pastor is, "You lied." Not a question, not a wondering, not a declarative statement. Why? How did this happen? Because we had two groups that could not meet at the same time to get all the information at the same time. And that started it being a very rocky appointment, a very rocky church assignment, because that's how it started, with misinformation not being given at the same time. I have a habit of holding on to emails. So if anyone wants to try to push back on this, that's fine. I've got emails from conversations before that meeting and after that meeting. It's the power of the cloud. You can hold on to lots of documentation. That's a reflection of, there's a test called the Enneagram assessment, one of the many assessments they have us take. I'm a type 6, Google it, give you some more insights into me. But yeah, that's why, if you've ever wondered why does Pastor Leo, everybody gets everything at the same time to the best of my abilities. I'll say things like, I'm thinking about this. Oh, maybe that might be a possibility. This needs to go to committee. That's got to go to leadership. Because that's what I want you to repeat to whoever it is you're going to repeat it to. Well, what did you? Well, Pastor Leo said, it's got to go to, it's going to have to go to committee. Exactly. Misinformation is a dangerous, dangerous thing. Whether it's accidental misinformation, I was going off of what we knew at the time. That's one thing. And then there's intentionally presenting misinformation. There is intentionally trying to misdirect. And there's sometimes it's just going to be easier to avoid the chaos if everybody hears the same thing at the same time. That's why I sent the one call about the return to in-person worship. It went out to everybody at the same time. Now, whether everybody got it at the same time depends on if you went to your voicemail or not. Went out. Shortly after the one call went out, something went out on social media. Then there's going to be another wave of things going out on social media as well about the return to in-person worship. Just want to make sure that that I'm trying to eliminate as much confusion as possible. I am trying to relieve as much stress as possible, and particularly for myself. Because I can tell you, it's pretty troubling when the beginning of the relationship starts from a place of hostility. I'll extend grace. I'll extend compassion. That's kind of what we do. But if you don't think clergy don't have feelings, don't remember things, and aren't affected by words, that's not the case. We are. A lot of times it just depends on how we choose to display it and not display it. I have had people in other places say some outlandish stuff to me in meetings. And then people were shocked by it. I'm playing it cool. I'm keeping it cool. It's not the place to get into that. Can't always let your emotions show in certain situations. Other situations, having emotions show are a good thing. But it's very troubling to have somebody who is close to my mother's age decide that was the dynamic of the relationship they were going to try to establish. No. Regardless of your age, the office of appointed elder naturally just comes with certain things. Now, how we work with that is something different. There are generational differences, there are cultural differences, there's some different things that apply there. But that's a pretty wild way to start off approaching your incoming pastors. Deal's done, paper has been signed. I'm coming to these places. But that's how it started off. Backstory, of course, I got blowback from the district superintendent about that. And the district superintendent and I went back and forth about that. And my response was, when the district superintendent said, "You put me in a bad position, you made me look bad," I said, "You put me in a bad position by not being consistent with what you told the churches." I'm not afraid to be honest with those people who are above me. After all, they're still elders, just like I am. I let the superintendent know, you're worried about your reputation. I'm worried about these churches. And I brought it up. Like I said, got documentation. We were able to get it worked out. But like a lot of relationships, if they start out rocky, it takes a lot of work to get them smooth. But yeah, I know that's another sermon for another time. And that's why I leave these stories out, because it's already been like 15 minutes? 19 minutes. It's been 19 minutes. That had been 19 minutes added on to a sermon. No, another sermon for another time. So, it's Sabbath. I'm going to go finish enjoying the rest of my Sabbath. I'm Pastor Leo Cunningham, Glenwood United Methodist Church, located on the west side of Columbus, Ohio. God's grace, God's peace, and God's love be with us all this evening. Also, clocks, spring ahead on Saturday. If you still have analog clocks, your phones, your watches, make sure we're springing ahead. Daylight saving time starts on Saturday. All right, talked long enough. Thank you so much. Subscribe, like, share. It's a new season. It's a new year. It's a new opportunity. Looking forward to this new chapter in the life of the church. Amen? Good night.